초콜릿은 달콤해 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 오렌지는
So, let's continue our discussion in chapter 4, which is a deontology. So, here we will discuss autonomy and universalizability. So, this video is in continuation with the report of Mr. Lumina in chapter 4. So, first, let us discuss autonomy. So, what is autonomy? So, according to Kant, Kant claims that the property of the rational will is autonomy, which is the opposite of heteronomy. So, what is autonomy and heteronomy? So, this comes from the Greek word authos, heteros, and nomos. So, authos means self, heteros means other, and nomos means law. So, if we will combine authos and nomos, we will have autonomy, which means self-law or self-legislating, while heteros and nomos, we will have heteronomy or other law. So simply speaking, autonomy is self-law or our law, and heteronomy is the other law or the law of others that is imposed to us. An example of this is when you were a child, did you like to brush your teeth? Of course, when we are a child, we don't like to brush our teeth. But our parents know that the essence of brushing our teeth is for our oral hygiene. Therefore, they do extra way just to make us brush our teeth every night using incentives or threats or undesirable consequences. So in this case, the are the children autonomous? Obviously not, because our parents legislate a principle for us to brush our teeth every night and imposed this using incentive or threats, which is the law of the other that is imposed to us, which is heteronomy. So now, think about, let's say we are in the 23, we're now in 23 or 22. So we are brushing our teeth because we are already know the essence of brushing our teeth. It is our oral hygiene. Therefore, we brush our teeth every night. So the first scenario is we legislate a principle, and then the second one is we enact that principle. Now, the law of our parents were we adapt into reality. So just what like I mentioned, that it is so willing to adopt the principle into reality which our parents impose to us when we are a children. So we make that adapt that principle into our reality. So Kant describes autonomy as the will that is subject to the law. So that is autonomy according to Mr. Kant. So furthermore, Kant claims that there are a difference between rational will and animal impulse. So as a human, we are rational one. We do reasonings, and we tend also to have a animal impulse. So the choice that can be determined by pure reason is called free choice. So that is a free choice. If that one is a pure reason, if that action is a pure reason. So that which is determinable only by inclination or a sensible impulse or the stimulus would that would be preferred to us animal choice or the arbitrium brutum. Human choice, in contrast, it is a choice that may indeed be affected but not determined by impulses, and is therefore in itself without an acquired skill or reason, not pure, but can nevertheless be determined to be question of free or pure will. If that is a human choice, it involves rational thinking. Involves a rational will. Thus, it is called a pure will. So, so therefore, there are two reasons behind our actions or behind our choices. It may be from our sensible impulses or stimulus or by our pure reason, which is our rational thinking. So let us discuss what is sensible impulses. So sensible impulses are usually bodily and emotional. So bodily instincts and desires such as the urge to eat, to drink, to sleep, to have sexual intercourse, and comprise the set of human compulsions for survival and the propagation of the species. So that is impulses or sensible impulses or urge. So emotions and sentiments also make up what can considered sensible impulses. So practical examples are the jealousy from seeing your girlfriend or boyfriend makes eye at someone, and the rage from being pushed fully by your opponent in basketball game. So that is our sensible impulses, our emotion. So that is sensible impulses. So on the other hand, there is a choice or action that is determined by pure reason. So Kant calls this as the action or free choice, and one may argue that human freedom resides in this capacity of reason to intervene to mediate within arbitrarium Baratum. So Kant claims that if we will use our pure reason, we can intervene or mediate our animal choice, our actions made by our impulses. So we just need to have a pure reason, or we just need to exercise our pure will, our rational will, to have this pure reason to mediate this arbitrarium brotum. So we have this mental capacity. This is what makes intervention possible between stimulus and the reaction. So if ever there's a certain scenario that makes us jealous, make us anger. So we have to reason out things before acting, because that may cause possible conflict. So Kant describe that human choice can be affected but is not determined by sensible impulses or the stimulus, or the what we call the animal choice or arbitrarium brotum. So it is purely, human choice is purely determined by our pure will, our rational will, our mental capacity. So, as what I have said earlier, that the human person is not only an animal but it's also rational, which means we are able to construct ideas and thoughts that are beyond our immediate surrounding or beyond our stimulus. So, we admit to two possible causes of our actions, which is the sensible impulses and the faculty of reasons, which our human freedom resides in that distinction. So we act according to our sensible impulses and we according to our faculty of reason. So in that case, our action must be determined and aligned with our faculty of reason, so that um, we make a proper judgment or we make a proper actions to that particular situations. And if ever our actions is determined by sensible impulses or stimulus, despite the source of those impulses being nevertheless internal, it is considered heteronymous. Why heteronymous? Because a sensible impulse is external to one's self-legislating faculty of reason and what he calls a foreign impulse, insofar as the will does not give itself the law. So, because the self-legislating faculty reason is not involved to that particular person, because that is external. The impulse is external. So, bear in your minds that whatever actions that it determined by our sensible impulses or stimulus, that would be always be a heteronymous or the other law. It is not our law. So in summary, with autonomy is idea of personal autonomy, this is the ability of an agent to govern themselves, to govern our own self, just as with the case of the government. If you are autonomous, your actions are truly yours and they are not forced into you by something external. So there are clear examples or situations where someone is not autonomous, just like for my example a while ago, such as where particular laws or cultural norms cause you to act in ways that you would not otherwise choose to, if that is a culture that is heteronymous. So that is autonomy. So let's proceed to universalizability. So universalizability, it is a continuation of autonomous. To figure out the faculty of reason or our rationality that can be cause an autonomous action, we need to learn a method or specific procedure that will demonstrate autonomy of the will. So, but before, and this procedure is what we call universalizability. So, but before explaining this procedure, it will be helpful to first make a distinction about kinds of moral theories, substantive and formal theories. So, first, let us define what is substantive moral theory. So, substantive moral theory is immediately promulgates the specific actions that comprise that theory. In such, it identifies the particular duties straightforward manner that the adherents of theory must follow. So the duties is straightforward manner to be followed. I will give you some example of substantive moral theory. It is the set of the Ten Commandments of the Judeo-Christian tradition, and it also reflect to the Beatitudes or the law or the Christian law, which is honor your father and mother, you shall not kill, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbors, and so forth. And that is a substantive moral theory. On contrast, formal moral theory does not supply the rules or commands straight away. So it is opposite to substantive moral theory. It does not tell you what you may not do or may do, but instead, a formal moral theory provides us the form or framework of the moral theory. That's why it is called formal moral theory. So to provide the norm or the form of moral theory, it's applied to a procedure the criteria of determining one's own the rules and the moral commands. So you should know your own moral command and your own rule to make a formal moral theory. So that is a difference between substantive and formal moral theory. So another example of formal moral theory is when we follow a recipe of sinigang. So, for example, we may add a slight variation to the ingredients and sequence of the steps, but if we want a dish to remain sinigang and not to transform it into some other kind of viand like pochero, we need to follow the steps that are relevant in making a sinigang. So to be exact, a formal moral theory will give us the list of rules or commands. Instead, it will give us the set of instructions on how to make a list of duties or moral commands. So, uh, substantive moral theory have already a list of commands and rules to be followed, while formal moral theory will give us an instruction on how to make a list of duties and moral commands. So this is what Kant made a categorical imperative theory, which is provides a procedure in way of identifying the rightness or wrongness of an action. So again, he articulates the categorical imperative this way, just like I mentioned, act only according to such maxim by which you can at once will that it become a universal law. So this for the formulation of this have a four key, which is the action, the maxim, the will, and the universal law. So what is the maxim? So maxim is consists of rule and depicts our pattern of behavior. So it is our pattern of actions, or if it is our pattern of behavior, our maxim. So it is a subjective principle of action. So when we say subjective, it is you. It is not objective. So maxim are akin to standard operating procedure or SOPs in our lives. So just like I mentioned, it is a role that depicts our pattern of behavior. So we become aware of our maxim if we talk about ourselves when we reveal our habits. So the formulation of the categorical imperative will reflect on what kind of maxim we lived in. So what does it mean to will a maxim that can become a universal law? So what does it mean? So it means that the maxim must be universalizable. So which is, will that it become a universal law? This means nothing other than imagining a world in which the maxim or personal rule that live by were adopted by everyone as their own maxim. So your actions must reflect on the maxim of the others, so, to become universalized. So like for example, if I think that it is good to steal or it is good to lie, then I must think also that what am I thinking is the thinking of the others. So, example, iniisip ba nila na mabuti ang paglalay? Iniisip ba ng iba na mabuti yun? Tanggap ba yun ng iba? Uh, Yun din ba yung paniniwala ng iba na okay lang na mag-lie ka or mag-cheat ka or whatsoever? Or if you do crimes, okay lang ba na sa iba na gagawa ka ng crimes? So, if ever your reasoning found out that hindi okay sa iba yun because someone believed that it is against the law or it is wrong. So therefore, your maxim or your action will not be universalizable. So you need to change your action. You need to change your maxim in order to align with the other law or with the law of the other, which is to be universalized. So what if everyone were obligated to follow that maxim? So just like for example, if I am obligated, everyone were obligated to do the maxim of lying. So lahat tayo maglalay. Lahat tayo mag-cheat. So what is the essence of morality if that's the case? So everything will be chaotic. So magiging magulo lahat. So therefore, para maiwasan natin ang pagkakagulo-gulo, we will change our maxim. So in this case, Kant, the grand works of metaphysics, according to Kant, takes up the issue of making false promises. So a person must reflect in doing false promises and start thinking what is right and wrong, since we have our reasonings, we are rational thinking, we have this faculty of reasons. So we should start thinking what is right and wrong. So demanding one rule for others and another for yourself is a contradiction. It is irrational. So if we will demand the rule to others to lie, if we will push them to lie, and other for yourself, it is a contradiction. So it is irrational. That is not a rational thing. So therefore, Kant rejects maxim or rejects an action if the universalized maxim becomes either self-contradictory or the act and its purpose becomes impossible. So if ever that it is self-contradictory and if ever the act and its purpose becomes impossible, it is impossible, then that maxim is rejected, or that actions is rejected. Therefore, it does not undergo into universe. It cannot be universalizable. So here, we reveal that according to Kant, if the maxim of role governing our action is not capable of being universalized, then it is unacceptable. Just like I mentioned, he pointed out that we would all agree on some rule if it's moral, and if you cannot will that everyone follow the same rule, your rule is not moral one. So just like my example a while ago, that we every one of us agree in in some rule, but if it is moral, and if it is not moral, then that law is unacceptable, and you cannot if everyone doesn't follow that the same rule, then your rule is not a moral one, which is not capable of being universalized. Then we agree on the same rule if it is moral one. And if you cannot will that everyone follows the same rule, then probably your rule or your actions or your maxim is not a moral one. So you need to change that. You need to be you need to start thinking what is right from that action in order for you to align with what is acceptable, in order for you to align with what is universalized actions. So, in summary, Kant's categorical imperative is a formal, not substantive moral philosophy. So, it is under in the formal moral theory. We use our own rational faculty to produce our own list of moral duties. So, we use our own reasonings, not our impulses. So the categorical imperative is precisely for the rational will that is autonomous. A rational will can then begin the work of producing a list of duties what are irrational and autonomous will believes to be right and wrong. So we need to consider when when we think or reason out what is right and wrong. So deontology, it is an enlightenment of morality. So it is based on the lights of one's own reasons when maturity and rational capacity take hold on a person's decisions making. So um, if ever our reasons are mature, and if ever we use our rational capacity or reasonings for our decision making, then that is the light of deontology, which is the enlightenment of our morality. So, a method of universalizability can be validate and adapt those rules and laws that are right and reject those that are irrational, thus impermissible because they are self-contradictory. So, those actions that are good and those maxims that are goods, or those rules or laws that are right, are accepted or being universalized. So we are encouraged to have a courage to think on our own, to be autonomous, to use a rational will against external authorities, against heteronomy, as well as internal based impulses, our stimulus or our sensible impulses that tend to undermine our autonomy and self-determination. So, although we exercise autonomy, but we have to bear in mind that we should not be selfish one. We should act according to what is accepted by the many, or what that is being universalized. So that is our discussion with autonomy and universalizability. So I hope you did learn from our discussion, so that you will use this as your guiding or as your moral principle, or addition to your moral principle that you are exercising for. Because this is all about morality. So thank you and keep safe, everyone.